So here we are again, Steve Smith, Daniel Glass, and myself just catching up on the world and on life as we're all hunkered down. And we wanted to talk a little bit about a project that they were instrumental on my being able to work with the great Bobby Morris and the creation of his life story, which is rich with life. Hard to describe, one person in their lifetime accomplishing what he's done. Starting out as a drummer on the streets of New York, which is, an incredible journey that he takes us through in this book. But Daniel was instrumental in myself and Hudson even, getting it in the first place. And Steve got involved. He's known Bobby from the work we had done in the Roots of Rock book, and was kind enough to write an introduction to the book. So tell us a little bit about your experience. Let's start with Daniel and your experience with Bobby.
Well, a band that I have, we're not that active these days, but I played with for about 20 years called Royal Crown Review. And I joined that band in '94, and we used to play with Sam Butera quite a bit because the style of music that we were playing, a lot of jump blues and early R&B, that kind of stuff. So we would play in San Francisco at Bimbo's with Sam Butera. We play in Vegas with Sam Butera. Of course, Sam Butera was Louis Prima's number one, sidekick, tenor sax honker in the band, part of the whole Louis Prima thing. So I got to talking with the drummer, and he said, if you really want to learn how to play the Prima shuffle, you got to connect with this guy in Las Vegas named Bobby Morris. And he said, Bobby's in his 80s, but he, in addition to being a drummer, he runs a booking agency, and he'll show you the real Prima shuffle, which, I was already very interested in these different kind of styles of music and trying to understand more. I was starting to interview. I've done quite a bit of interviewing myself. So one time we were in Vegas, we were there quite a bit, playing in the casino lounges and clubs and things. And I looked up Bobby, and I went to his office, and I hung out with him, and he showed me how to play the Prima shuffle. And after that, we became great friends, and stayed in touch over the years. He came to see Royal Crown Review, which was a big honor. And at some point, there was an event in New York City that, Steve, you were at. Were you at that event, Rob?
I was not there.
I think Paul Siegel was there, though, right?
Paul was there. I was out of town.
Yeah,
I don't remember
and it was
why.
the Sessions people honoring 4 or 5 different important figures in the drum world who were over 80 at the time. And it was sort of this over 80 event. And they asked me to introduce Bobby Morris. And I think, Steve, I don't know if you knew Bobby already at that point, if that's when you first met him, but we all went out after and had dinner or whatever. And so Bobby was had already been working on his autobiography, but he wasn't sure where to go with it. He finished it. He had actually asked me to edit it along the way, but I just was too busy doing all the other things that I was involved with. And he finally got it done and asked, what should I do as far as publishing this? And so I recommended Rob and Hudson Music because I thought that would be a great match. And
Thank you.
before you know it, a book arrived on the scene.
Yeah.
Oh, and I should mention one other thing, that the interview of Bobby Morris in the Roots of Rock drumming book was an interview that I had done with him back in like probably '99 or something like that.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Bobby's just been a delight getting to know and spend time with. I was out to Las Vegas. We did 2 book signings. Steve was able to attend one of them during a residence that he was doing out there with Journey at the time. So, it's been just a delight. And again, this story, it really is, way more than sort of a drummer story or a story about, a drum life. It's, the people he's met and crossed paths with. It's every page. It's like, I gave the book to friends that aren't musicians that loved it. I gave it to my mom. She said she read it in 3 days. It's just an incredible story about an incredible life. So yeah, I really appreciate you recommending us, and Steve, your contribution. You just a beautiful, introduction that you wrote for the book.
Well, yeah, I was on tour, and I remember you wrote and wanted me to write a full forward, and I said, no, Rob, I'm on tour. I'm just too busy to be able to do that. And he goes, well, you said, well, I'll send you the book. So you sent me the book. Once I started reading it, I couldn't stop reading it.
Oh.
You sent me as a PDF,
right,
before it was actually printed, and I was just blown away. I had known Bobby over the years, and I actually don't remember the first time I met him, but it could have been, I played in Las Vegas with Vital Information at a gig, and I invited him, and he came and hung out.
I think you sent me a picture of the two of you from that
show.
Yeah.
At a gig, at a high school. It was like reminiscent of Buddy Rich playing the high school circuit.
Yeah.
So, and then we hung out at that 80s event in New York. And we stayed in touch. And so I've been to Vegas a few times with Journey, and I'd see him, and like you said, that book signing. But when I read the book, I was really blown away, because of course I knew about him playing drums with Louis Prima, but I didn't realize all the other associations that he had, that he became his own band leader and then musical director in various shows. And he was Elvis's musical director, and Barbra Streisand.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Well, and he hung out with Sam Giancana, and he
you can't give it away.
We
got to give people a few tidbits I mean,
no, but and then really one of the most impressive things of all is he's the drummer that rehearsed the Buddy Rich Big Band when Buddy Rich first put together, so Buddy could learn West Side Story. So for instance, I don't even think he gets into quite the detail that because I've toured with a lot of the musicians that played in Buddy's first incarnation of the 1966-67 band, and I've done a lot of touring with Bobby Shue, who was his lead trumpet player, and Bobby Shue told me that for 2 hours, Bobby Morris went over West Side Story with Buddy sitting in the front row smoking a cigarette, just chain smoking and listening and learning the arrangement, and then finally getting up on the bandstand and playing West Side Story flawlessly from beginning to end. But see, that wouldn't have happened had he didn't have a drummer like Bobby who could read music well and knew how to play big band. And, so that's just one part of one chapter in the book.
Yeah.
It's really
it's fascinating too how he describes Las Vegas, because he grew up in New York and he was on 52nd Street, knew all the bebop guys, but then at a young age, he takes a gig in Las Vegas, and just Las Vegas, today we think of it as this enormous place with just miles and miles of neon. And when Vegas really started, he moved there, I think in 1950, there were literally 5 casino hotels, and each of them was no more than 2 stories.
Yeah, they were like motels. It was like the old school motel.
I mean, they really were. And, one thing that's so cool is that he was the drummer in what was called the Relief Band. So you had shows, it was still a small enough scene that you had shows, and most of the drummers in the shows would work 6 nights a week, and they'd have 1 night off. So on that 1 night off, the Relief Band would come in, and these guys were the super ringers who could sight read the show on the spot, whatever it was, because the shows would change every couple of weeks. So every night he would go into a different room and sight read a different show with a different artist. That was his gig. That was his job. And he actually left that gig to start the tenure with Louis Prima. And the story of Louis Prima, I mean, it's just like, again, I don't want to give too much away, but Louis Prima, in essence, in Las Vegas, was a huge part of of rock and roll in the 1950s. People don't associate that. We think about Chuck Berry or Little Richard or Bo Diddley, that kind of thing, you know, Buddy Holly. We don't think about Louis Prima, but there were so many other elements and angles to what was happening as rock was dawning in the 50s. And I'll tell one more great story that I just love. Trust me, we could sit here for an hour and tell stories from this book. We wouldn't even come close to divulging all the amazing stuff that's in there. But Bobby, he told me in the interview, and I'm sure he talks about it in the book, that you know, rock and roll is becoming popular, and Capitol Records in LA, which was actually a rather new label that had got its start by doing a lot of rhythm and blues. Again, Nat King Cole was involved, and people don't really know that that's how Capitol, you know, sort of paid its rent at the beginning. But there were no drummers that could play rock and roll. So they were like, well, what's an important rock and roll band? Well, Louis Prima. So they called Bobby, and he said like a couple of days a week in the middle of the week, he would fly to LA and go to the Capitol Records building and just cut hours and hours of rock and roll. And he said he doesn't know what a lot of it was because, you know, the singer wasn't even in the room. And he would just go and they would just cut tracks and tracks and tracks. And then he'd fly back to Vegas for his Prima stuff. So, you know, it's hard to even imagine like how much early rock and roll Bobby was a part of. And we probably will never know, you know, that he's a guy on who knows how many records. Yeah.
Yeah. The history, it's incredible. You know, really, like you said, Daniel, I'm sorry, there's an unbelievable wealth of music and music history, you know, relating to Bobby. It's
like a Forrest Gump kind of thing where he's like ground zero of so many things that we wouldn't even associate with each other over decades.
The Kennedy play a part in it.
Hey,
it is.
We
like,
can't give any more away. But I will say, I
won't tell the story, but I'll just say it's well written, and Bobby's a great storyteller.
Yeah.
So really, once you start reading this book, it's fun.
Yeah.
And addictive. You get hooked on it. And I love reading musicians' autobiographies. You know, I recently read, you know, Elton John's, which is great, and I've read Keith Richards, which is great. You know, a lot of these books are really pretty awesome. And I'd say this is right up there. It's you know, it's really a great story, well told.
Wow. Yeah, Bobby is great at telling stories. I'm sure we all have had that experience of hanging with him, and then you're just sitting there like, what? Really? Yeah.
I'll give the Frank Sinatra story I'll just tell it really quickly. We'll come back to it another time. Let's we'll say see you guys, you know, again. We should definitely hop on again, and it's always fun hanging with you guys. So since we can't do it in person as much as we'd like to, this is the next best thing.
Let's do it again soon.
Stay safe and healthy and productive.
You too. Yeah. Be good, everybody. Be safe out there.